quite exciting to have Billie Tsien here with us today to partake in the discussion. And we're joined, well, I'm Victoria McReynolds and Dana Campbell, Jado. And then we're joined by students who participated in the submission of the question for this year, which was, what is the image of architecture? So actually quite an open-ended question that was put forward. And I'll let each of the students introduce themselves and say, introduce yourself, what year in architecture, where you're from, and I'm also actually curious to hear if there are other, well, I should say it this way, if you are the first in your family to pursue an architecture degree, or if there are other women.
Okay. I'm Kirsten Merlo. I'm a third-year student, and I'm not the first person. Yeah.
Who else?
My dad, cousin, both of them went to Turkey for architecture.
Oh,
yes.
And where are you from?
Dallas. Yeah.
My name is Fabiola. I come from El Paso, Texas, and I am the first woman or person in my family to pursue architecture. A lot of people in my family study engineering, so I have that background, and I'm graduating after this summer.
Soon. Really soon.
Yeah. Really soon.
I'm Rebecca, and I am from here, from Lubbock. I am the first in my family to pursue a degree in architecture. And a third degree. I'm definitely the first in my family to pursue a degree.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ginger. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I'm first in my family to be an architect, or try to be an architect, I should say. So everybody else is kind of more like creative in their own way, but I'm just gone down the architecture realm, I should say.
My name is Megan Parker, and I'm from Temple, Texas, which is about 45 minutes from Austin. And I'm a third-year architecture student. And nobody in my family has ever pursued architecture, but there's a lot of like the creative art kind of side of my family. So.
Hello, my name is May. I'm from San Antonio, Texas as well. Lots of Texans. This is my last semester before studying abroad, and then I'll be graduating in August. I'm the first in my family to go to college and also architecture. So
Where are you going to go abroad?
yes, we have study abroad programs in several different countries, and I chose the one in Seoul, Korea. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, one of the questions, just to maybe start, and that came up as an interesting point, is to see if, Billie, you had a female role model, or which were the female role models for you as you were pursuing your interests in architecture?
Well, I think my first role model, my mother always worked. So I suppose I just grew up with the belief that whatever it was, I would always be working. She's a scientist, so I also knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't be science. So for those of with a lot of engineering, there's always a lot of pressure, science and engineering, especially if you're first generation. It's like your parents see this, and I understand it now as a parent. You want to feel like your children have a kind of something solid to back them up, and things in the arts certainly seem very big. So you should find out about the religious mind.
Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Caitlin Barhorse, and I'm a third year.
And where are you from?
I'm from Lubbock, actually. Yeah.
Hi, sorry. It's okay. And your name?
My name's Evelyn Valdez.
And where are you from?
From Coppell, Dallas area, Texas.
And where are you in terms of your...
I'm a second year grad student doing my MBA and my MArch at the same time.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Was your undergraduate degree from
Here?
in architecture from here?
Yes.
Well, that must be a lot to juggle.
You get to stay an extra semester, so it's a lot of fun.
So I guess I was asked the question by Victoria whether I had any women who were role models in terms of as I became an architect, and I would say there were very few. And those women who were some of the most prominent women were very frightening to me. Because it seems, I guess I never felt that I could be as tough as they appear to be. So we're about the same age, but Zaha Hadid was sort of practicing. I came to architecture a little late. And so I would look at these people and think, oh, I don't know if I can be this tough. I don't know if I have the ability to I suppose kind of swagger in a man's world as a man does. And it had me very worried for a while. And what I realized though is that the greatest strength that you can find is in yourself and who you naturally are. And that was actually, it was very comforting, but it took a long time because I felt like I should be somebody else and I didn't know how to be somebody else. But I realized that you can go into a room and if you speak fairly quietly, people generally have to stop talking in order to listen to you. So if you feel more comfortable speaking fairly quietly, and that's where your strength is, and that's how you should tap into your own strength. So I think one of the good things about architecture is that it's a really long and slow profession. And it means that you get to grow up in it. And you don't have to be brilliant. In fact, I don't think people are ever really deeply brilliant immediately. One of the things I want to talk about in the lecture is this idea of a kind of deliberate practice. And there's and I think in our practice, we've made slowly, you sort of never know what you're doing. You're just sort of blindly kind of groping when you first start out. And, slowly you kind of bump into things and you sort of learn that you shouldn't sort of go really fast in certain directions. And you kind of learn from your life. But we really believe that architecture is a life. It's not a job. And it's a life in a very positive and interesting way. So as you grow older, you can get some water? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to give you some of my iced tea. that you develop a skill by working at it over a long period of time. And so there's an actual theory called deliberate practice, which says that you don't become masterful at anything until you've done it for about 10,000 hours. So whether it's if you're a musician or if you're doing sports, it's not, it's something that you keep on working at and you develop it slowly over time. And I deeply believe that that's what the practice of architecture is. That it's something that's developed over time. And I think as you develop it over time, you also grow into yourself and you become more confident about who you are. And so I feel like it's I feel if you accept your own character and allow that to sort of determine your practice, you will be a strong practitioner and you will have a strong sense of yourself. That you don't have to be any other character. You don't, and I think actually architecture is incredibly collaborative. And I think in many ways, although one could say it's a sort of stereotype of women, I do think that one of our great skills is that we have a sense and sensitivity to other people around us. And whether that's something that's been ingrained in us because we've been asked to be sensitive to other people, or whether it's a natural thing, I don't know. But I do know that the women in our studio have a better sense of the entire sort of kind of complexion, emotional complexion of what's going on in the studio. And I think that that's a hugely important aspect of architecture. I think it's never like in films or in novels, the kind of one person who is the great genius who makes things happen. It's really about kind of family that works together and makes things happen. So, so I think it's a profession where we have huge strengths and a lot to give. There's always the question, where are the missing 32%? And because in school, I don't know whether you find it here, but it's often 50-50. Or often, sometimes, in schools it's more women than men, and then, but to me it's no mystery why women are dropping out of the profession at about 32, 34, 35. It always has to do with family and how you balance that. That also scared me too, because I thought, well, when I went to school, I wasn't sure I wanted to have a family. It just seems so far in the future. But at a certain point, then you start to think, well, do I have a family? And it frightened me to think, in order to be a strong practitioner, does that mean I have to be by myself in order to be so focused? And I think that's a question that all women in practice have had to ask themselves, because it is so much a life and a profession that you need to understand how to balance it. I think it's really important as we move into the profession and as we become professionals that we support the women in our profession. It's really amazing, but some of the larger corporate firms in New York don't have paid maternity, which is really shocking to me. But I think even in what we can do in smaller offices, we do have paid maternity leave, paid paternity leave. It's not a year, like in Europe. It's, unfortunately, it's 2 months, but it's what we can do. But we also, in our studio, make it clear that whether you're the father or the mother, you have to leave to do something with your child. That's the priority. And actually in that way, people, when they feel comfortable with the ability to at least try to balance their family life and their work life, it's very cohesive for the studio. I think we operate very much like a quite tight family. And so I would say when you go out to work, you need to look for places that are supportive. And that sounds like a kind of, ideal situation, because you're thinking, when I go out to work, I just want to get a job. And whoever wants to hire me, I'm going to go work for those people, no matter what. But since it is so much a part of your life, more so than, let's say, you were doing something that was much more 9 to 5. I think you have to be thoughtful about kinds of places that you choose to work, because that is also about controlling your life. And I think in our practice, practice, we've tried to be more thoughtful about the kinds of work that we take on. So in the beginning, you need to think about the kind of place that you want to work. And as you become practitioners, I think you need to think about the kind of work that you take. So one of the things that you'll see that over time, we've tried to think about what are our guiding principles as a practice. And everybody develops them for themselves. And one of the principles for us has been to say no. And we only learn to say no from saying yes too much. It's kind of like the bumping into the wall. You do it a few times and you learn to avoid the wall. Or like if you have a bad relationship a few times, you start to know what to look for in order to say no. And same thing with projects and with clients after a few times, because in the beginning you don't know and you say yes to everything. You look at a situation and you think, this is not a good situation. This is not a place where I feel like I can make work that in some way satisfies me. And for us, we hope it somehow makes the world a better place, which sounds very Pollyanna-ish. But I think amazingly enough, that's what architecture can do. It can, in very small ways, make the world a better place. So we've learned in our practice to say no to certain kinds of work, which I think we're not saying to other people that they have to follow our same line. I mean, so in other words, we wouldn't look at somebody and say, you're wrong because you're taking this kind of work. Each person has to make their own decisions. But I think over time in your own practice as you work, you start to make your own decisions about how you move forward. And for us, there's kinds of work that we know, number one, don't make us feel good about what we do. And number two, we're actually the wrong kinds of architects for those kinds of projects. So it doesn't make the client feel very good about what we do either. What I'm trying to say is that slowly as you move out into the world, you have the power to shape yourself and to shape your work. And you're not simply at the whim of the profession shaping you. And it doesn't, it's not huge things, but it's slight sort of adjustments as you sort of move through. And you realize, just as you're making space, you can start to make your own profession. I really believe that.
How was it for you when you got out of school, taking that path, and then getting to become the founder of the firm?
See, I have a totally atypical situation because I've only had one job. So when I got out of school, I went to work for Todd, who eventually became my husband and partner. So it's in many ways, I can give advice about a certain kind of practice, and I'm a complete neophyte in terms of moving from office to office. I do remember when I was first out of school and I was living with my parents in a suburb in New Jersey, and thinking, and it was at that time, it was when you were using a telephone and you had to call and cold call these offices and ask for time to come by and show your portfolio. I don't know whether it's better or worse. I mean, it's easier to sort of email somebody your work stuff, but it also kind of forces a kind of face-to-face situation when you call them. But I remember sitting in the kitchen in my parents' house and having this list of telephone numbers, and somebody had given me these offices and dialing the number, and then before it would ring, I would hang up. Look at me. And sort of force myself so it is hard, that first step. But I think the most important thing, if you have a passion about trying to work for somebody, then make it a very focused passion. If you don't have passion about a particular person that you'd like to work for, then understand where you want to live. You want to live in the city. You want to live in Chicago, so you go there. I think you have to be there in some way physically in order to get a job. We actually won't hire people when we do hire people if they're writing from someplace far away, because it's very scary for us to feel like we're having the responsibility of bringing somebody from wherever they are, and then if somehow things don't work out. So it's not that you necessarily have to be living there, but you have to appear to be living there. Even if you're, staying with, you're on somebody's couch and staying in somebody's apartment. If sending in an email from someplace really far away generally is not going to work. Pretty much still need to be able to sort of show up. And if you identify the places where you want to work, and you may have heard this all in your, I don't know if you have a professional practice class at all. What really totally opens the door, at least in our office, and it doesn't open the door far enough because we actually don't hire very often because people stay for a really long time and we don't really generally take on somebody until somebody leaves. But what will at least get you in the door and have, where we can sit down with somebody in the office is if you write a really good letter. And that cover letter is really important. And it can't be the sort of standard, you can't look like you simply insert name here. Because it's so clear when it's a boilerplate. It's so clear when somebody writes a letter and you look at this letter and you say, this letter went out to 25 different offices and all they did was they changed the name. At least identify your 5 top ones. I'm not saying you have to have 25 heartfelt letters, but identify your top places where you really like to be. Somebody's going to read it, in smaller offices, there's a better chance probably that one of the principals will read it. But if it's a letter that really shows a knowledge and interest of the work that's been done in that office, and in some way, why you're interested in being in this office, why you feel connected to this office, it really makes a difference. And it always, it's I think a very personal connection. The other thing is, it's amazing. I think it's because Todd's first name is spelled with 1 D, which is unusual. My name is spelled oddly because it's a non-normal name. Do not spell the names of the people in the office incorrectly. I would say 40%, 35% of the stuff that we get from people, one of our names is spelled incorrectly. And that pretty much puts you on the do not even bother to look at pile. Because if you're not precise enough to be able to spell the principles, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I tell you we get this all the time. It's like they don't care enough to be careful about what they're doing. And if they can't be careful about something as simple as a letter, how can they be precise in the studio where you're asking them to be precise? So it's small things like that, but I think it's things that really make a difference, at least when we look at student work. Anyway, so that's it. Again, I'm reassessing. Let's start with your question and I keep on going.
I want to go back to, I had a question about how do you balance your personal and professional life? Because I'm a mother and a wife, and I go to school here. So, I mean,
You're already doing that.
it's hard, it's really hard, but I mean, that's a lot of coordination, but how does that translate into like professional work?
How old is your child?
8 and 9.
Oh, 2.
I have 2. Sorry, I didn't clarify.
Well, I think, of course, as infants, it's the hardest. So you're fine. I got you out of it. You definitely done the hardest part, but I think, it's in a way going back to finding a studio that will support you. And at the same time assuring the studio that while you're there, you give your all. I would say the people that have kids in our office are the most efficient people in our office. It's true they're not there at 10 o'clock at night calling for takeout, but it's because they got whatever they needed to be done, so that they could leave. I mean, we work from 9 to 6, so they leave at 6. But if somebody has to leave at 5 to pick up their kid from daycare, then they leave at 5, and they kind of set their time. So we figure anybody who's in our office is responsible enough to set their time, figure out how to get it done. But I'm not denying that it's a struggle, especially if both of you are working. But what I will say is that it's a very interesting, you are a very interesting parent with your children. Because I think that what you do with your kids is you teach them to look. And you're constantly teaching them to look in ways that most other kids are not taught to look. Because you probably go around and you're looking at things and you're saying, well, this is really interesting, but this is really badly done. This doesn't look good at all. And so you end up with kids who are going around constantly looking at things.
And that's funny you say that because my kids are playing Minecraft and they're like, oh, I want the cyan looking thing that's over there. Where'd you get these words? And it's like, yeah, so I definitely see that.
I think it's very interesting because any kids who've been brought up connected to the design world have a very different head, and the kids don't realize that until they're probably about young adolescents, and then they go around actually looking at things and talking about things, and their friends look at them. They don't understand what they're talking about, but it's wonderful because their eyes are open in a much larger way, and so for you'll have given them a gift. But I would say, I know it's hard, and there's always adjustments, but you need to look for a place that will allow you to do that. And truly, what year are you? 3rd grade. So you're going to be pretty old when you're out of school. I mean, the kids are.
Oh.
Not you.
Well, I will be, yeah.
The kids will be pretty much, I think you'll find it a struggle to get them to be with you, because maybe it's not so much now because they want to be with you, but they kind of go off on their own. It's nice though, you have an interesting dialogue with them later on because they grew up sort of looking at things in this interesting way, even if they don't choose to be in any way involved in design. It's good. I think the breadth that you're full, the broadness in a way, I think children force you open, they force you to be more flexible. I think one of the things I felt was because I was 35 when I had my son, and I couldn't bear the thought of chaos, and with children comes chaos. And I realized that it's, at first it felt overwhelming because you're used to sort of organizing everything looking really right, sort of like, you sort of make your beautiful little tableau of your objects, and then you suddenly have this child, and you who used to sort of organize your life cannot even take a shower because you can't figure out how you can get in the bathroom. And then you have these kids that sort of mess things up. But what it does is it cracks open a kind of stiffness that can happen too. And so I think it actually adds to a kind of, it helps you with the creative life, although it certainly doesn't feel like it at the beginning. importance of what I'm doing. But I also know where it falls in the level of sort of life importance. What's life important to me? So I think if you have a family, you come with a different set of skills, and those skills are very, very, very valuable. They're very prized. It's not always, thin guys in black shirts. They don't know. Long pants and the glasses. They don't know everything. We know a lot.
I have a question. I was just wondering, what kind of opposition did you face as not just a woman, but as a minority woman? Just maybe in school or in the workplace, and
well, I think that so I went to school in California, and at UCLA, Asians are not the minority. And then, of course, in New York, it's very mixed. But I think one of the issues that happens, and I would say particularly as an Asian woman, is that it appears that it might appear that one is delicate and not forceful. That goes back to the sort of acceptance of who you are and the belief. And anyone who's dealt with an Asian mother can certainly know they can be very forceful. That you can be forceful in other ways. You can have strength in other ways. And so I think it's not about being big or loud, but you can be extremely clear. And I think that sort of cuts through sort of the cute little Asian girl. I think in terms of, it's interesting. It's really interesting because when I first started working, in the beginning there are a lot of really sort of rough older guys on the site. But either they would sort of be protective of you or they would ignore you. And then later on, 10 years or so on, you realize that the guys were much more comfortable seeing women on site because most of them grew up with their mothers working. So it wasn't like, little lady, you're supposed to be at home, because probably the majority of them had mothers who had jobs because we all, everybody needed to work. So I think there was more comfort with having women in the field now. I'm not sure though whether it's a very interesting and difficult time, I think, for feminism. I mean, there are whole issues, and I was just at a dinner party last night, the sort of rape on campus and sexual abuse and, freedom and the way men treat women. And we were wondering how, and this is a more general question, we would assume that so many young men in school now were brought up by women who are working by women who probably believed in feminism, but I'm not sure that that's expressing itself in the way young men are behaving to women now, and I don't know why. I don't know why. That's a bigger question than architecture. I think I have to say, I still think within, I think mid-size to smaller firms treat women better than very big corporate firms. And I think there's still kind of corporate mentality that's kind of entrenched. And I don't know whether that, I actually haven't seen that changing over time.
Well, it's also a bit interesting here in Texas in the way that the earlier stat that you mentioned about the 50-50 isn't the statistic in this college. It's closer to 30% or a high 30%, a low 40%. And so the way that other cities and major metropolises have developed with a diversity and sensibility isn't necessarily ingrained or hasn't made the same type of traction here. I don't know, maybe a few of you care to share like if your mother was working or what the dynamic of the mother father was growing up.
I know in my family, my mom was actually the one that worked and my dad was the one that stayed home and took care of the family. So I always kind of saw my mom as a very powerful woman and, women could, take care of a family as well as be a mother that comes home and take care of the family in a financial sense and in that motherly sense. So that was kind of a powerful image for me to see. And then that my dad kind of had the power to step back and let her, take charge and in that sense. Yeah. So I grew up in that kind of a household. So I didn't see going into architecture as like, kind of like, oh, I'm a girl going into architecture. It's like, I'm going into architecture because I want to do this and I know I can. Yeah. So that's a powerful, motivator for me is seeing my mother be that. I don't know about y'all and how y'all grew up.
I think definitely both my parents, I grew up with both of them working, but I think it was still intimidating in the fact that even today the percentage of women in architecture is just so low. And then even in Texas, like the stigma of a female architect, because I've been around like architects and engineers a lot and you see them just get ignored or put, like you were saying, either careful or ignore kind of attitude. So I think definitely coming into trying to pursue a profession in it was still intimidating. I think it's still a struggle to get away from that because like you were saying, even the women that are in architecture, they seem, really strong and it's like, well, how do you live up to that, Yeah. Do you really need to be that person to do it? And,
I don't think you do.
Right.
I don't think you do. I think you need to have that confidence in yourself and not be somebody else.
Right.
Particularly if that person seems like it's impossible. Or even if you wouldn't really actually want to be that person.
Right, yeah. It's definitely powerful to hear that you just find security in who you are.
Right. Standing around.
Yeah.
So, for people that are getting out of school relatively soon, are you intending to stay in Texas? Well, you're going to go to Korea for a little while, but...
Just this summer.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm also going to Verona during the summer and then graduating. But my plans are staying here for a master's degree. And after that, we'll see. I know wherever the job takes me. That's why I was curious of how do you approach the entering the field,
Right.
especially. I've heard a lot of opinions of before or after getting your professional degree. But
You mean, should you try to work between graduating from here and going back to grad school?
yes.
I would say that would be a good idea. She's like, yes.
We've had this conversation.
it's good to, sort of wade in the water a little bit. And it's probably also good to get a break from being in school all the time. And that said, I didn't take my advice. I never worked in an office, as I said, until I finished graduate school. I had a completely unrealistic idea of what an architect was. I thought it was a white office, which many of them are white offices. I thought that somehow it would be extremely calm situation. And that there would be classical music playing. It's like somewhere between sort of heaven and I and so I was really surprised. Actually, one of the things that was really at first and for a long time frustrating was when you're in school, you work really hard and you become exhausted. You finish your project and it's done. And done. You don't have to think about it anymore. And then, but when I started working, we'd work on these projects, and I feel like no sooner did I get things tidied up over here, then something would start to fall apart over here. Projects didn't seem to get done. They weren't finished at a certain date. They always seemed to kind of continue on. And then I realized, actually, that's what life is like. Things, relationships don't just stop. They kind of trickle on. Life just sort of is always coming undone as you're neatening it up over here. Things are getting messy over here. So I kind of accepted that. But I do think it would be good to work for a while. And I think it will help direct your interest in graduate school. Did you work?
No, I still haven't worked, but very much all about school. Once I graduate here, I'm actually applying for my doctorate at UT Austin.
Oh.
So I'm going to go for more school. But
What's your
between
doctorate going to be?
I really want to do historic preservation and have that, because I've gotten such a, I guess, theoretical experience here that something that's a little more grounded, I feel, would kind of even me out internally, not really as like, someone who's applying for a job, but I really want to know not just, theory and having these crazy buildings here in DDF and then going off into the real world and being like, well, design this curtain wall. You have 6 weeks to hash it out, but really go into all the places that architecture can take you into. And then between then and there, I was actually planning on going to Mexico and maybe working hands-on for an architect and learning, actually working with materials. And so I don't want to be, personally, I don't want to be one-dimensional. So hopefully, whenever someone's looking to hire me, they can see that, I have an internal motivation to be wholesome, not just on paper, like, hey, look at all these things I did in school,
Well, that sounds really, really interesting, to sort of do the hands-on work. And, you might also consider Columbia to be preservation.
It's more of like tuition, because I pay for my school. I actually, like in grad school, I have 2 jobs and I go to grad school, so.
Well, they give out fairly big scholarships, and I think you would be considered a kind of special person. You're not coming from the standard schools, the theater schools. And don't necessarily rule it out.
Okay.
Throw open those doors. Let's see what's here.
Yeah.
Anything else? It's hard when you're sort of sitting here.
I have all these questions I think about all the time, but it's
Billie, can you talk a bit about the dynamics between you and Todd in the way that you work through design projects and how that's played out? Because, as you said, you are a partner. It's a partnership, and so it's a conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's. I the reason we work together well, and the reason our marriage has lasted such a long time while we're working together, is that we're very different. And so it allows us to be sort of working at the same thing, but not doing the same thing. So we work together in every project. So there are no projects that are sort of on this project or on my project, unless sometimes it's like a piece of furniture or a rug or something like that. But then the other person will do prints. And I think that I have one of my strengths is I can clarify ideas. And so I think Todd will often sort of jump in with a kind of thought, which is generally kind of a sketch, but it's not very formed. And so in a certain way, it's like, he gives me a 50-word sentence, and I look at it, and I can make it clearer, and I can make it 10 words. I think that he is, to me, quite brilliant in envisioning three-dimensional space. So he really, really feels it in his head. I think that I have a big interest in materials and collage. Not collage as a kind of flat layering one thing on top of another, but a series of different materials that come together three-dimensionally. So I always give him a hard time because he always says, well, I came out of Richard Meyer's office, and I said, well, that was more than a couple of lifetimes ago, so why do you keep on saying that? But I think that his feeling is that together, our work is contemporary work, is modernist work, but it's kind of enriched, embellished minimalism. Because I think that I'm not interested in only form. I'm interested in texture, material, and color. So when people say, in the future we'll be able to 3D print a building, I'm thinking, wow, that would be such a boring building because it would be all made of the same thing. And it may be a kind of interesting form, but for me, that's not enough to make it feel that it's like I'm looking at the store and I'm thinking, what an interesting idea and cheap idea to sort of decorate the store. I can see it's kind of been beat up and things have happened to it, but I think it's a door that you'll also remember. And so it's those sort of details to me that give a kind of life to architecture. So, I appreciate the things that can be done with technology. At the same time, I value the things that can be done by the hand, because there's an imprecision that happens that I love. The thing about the sort of Native American weaving rugs and then weaving a mistake so that it, in some way shows that it's been done by hand, and sort of acknowledging there's an imperfection or something that is not uniform. So I like so there's kind of balance between the two, because I think that Todd's thinking about form and I'm thinking about texture. I think that I also, we have a lot of disagreements, but I trust that in the end we will both finally come to the same thing. But our roots are quite different as to how we get there. But it's like you know when you're there, that's what you want. And so over the years, and maybe just proximity in time, but we'll be in a play this game where we go into a gallery or museum and you always pick out the thing you would steal. We always do now, we steal the same thing. So, you know, say we've been working together for 34 years, I can't even remember. But, I mean, since we've pretty much been together all that time, since like being married for like 70 years. Because you really get daytime, you get nighttime. We still enjoy being together. And the studio is very much an extended family. So, you know, we feel very connected to all the people in our office. Big parties when they leave, or when they have babies, when they get married, all that stuff. Luckily, well, yeah, nobody's gotten a divorce.
So I just have a question about like where your design intentions or where you get your inspiration from. I know I read about your 8 philosophies on your website, but can you just kind of like explain a little bit where y'all find yours?
Well, so much of it has to do with wherever we are. So I had a teacher, and he was an architect who was quite well known, and then he sort of forgotten. But his name was Charles Moore, and he was a California architect. And he was my thesis advisor. He was a terrible teacher, but he would take us on field trips, and it was really, really interesting because it was part of teaching. Teaching, you just see. And we would go to see a Schindler house, which was, you need to understand why you're seeing a Schindler house and learning these details. And then we would go to Magic Mountain, which was an amusement park. And we'd sort of talk about things we saw there. And what he did was, and later after he died, a lot of people that he went to school with who were his colleagues said that he did this for them when they were in school. He really taught you to look deeply and see that you can find inspiration from all kinds of things. And so I feel like he really taught me that wherever I go, wherever we do a project, a lot of the inspiration really comes from what you see around you. And the great thing also about being in practice rather than being in school is that you don't have to generate so much stuff yourself. Because I studied art when I was an undergraduate, and I felt it was very hard because I felt 2 things. One is it's so subjective. Like, how do you determine whether you're succeeded or whether you failed? It's like, does your teacher like it, or do you like, and why do you like it? What does that mean? You like it or you don't like it? But architecture was really interesting because it gave you a set of parameters. Well, practice is even more interesting than what you get in school because the parameters are much more lively. So you're inspired by places that you're given, sites that you're given. You're inspired by the kind of client talking with the person. And in a certain way, you're also inspired by budgets. I think unlimited budgets are kind of like being in art school. You can do anything. It doesn't happen that often. But in a certain way, being forced to think thoughtfully about what you do and the materials you use also inspires creativity. I'd also say that people think that we somehow imagine different materials out of nowhere. Like, I imagine, a new kind of brick or something. And that really isn't true. We visit all of these as much as we can. Quarries, brick factories, places where they make tile, places where they're doing fabric. Because you can't really imagine these things because people know how to make them. But what you can do is, like going to a site, you can look at what they're making and you can say, look at those glasses, and look at how they're making those glasses, and look at the leftover parts that were shaved off shaved off parts of plastic and you could, I don't know, mix them in with some resin, and that would be an amazing thing. So it's not making it up from nowhere. It's going someplace where something is already happening and thinking creatively about it. It's like, you know, it's like when you have something in your refrigerator. It's sort of easier to kind of make an interesting dinner from stuff that you find in the refrigerator than if you go to the grocery store and think, what might you make for dinner? So, I mean, you're given a palette of materials. You think about how you can use them. So, I think that you can use what's around you much more than you imagine. And that the burden of having to invent shed that burden. Because you can invent within what exists, and it's still an invention. And what makes it even better is if you're working with somebody who's making things already, they can actually make it happen. Whereas you can invent all you want, but if you can't make it happen, it's meaningless. I just think there are a lot of ingredients that practice and being in the world give you that you don't have in school, where you're sort of floundering about like, you know, you're given an assignment, but what inspires that assignment? You don't have anything poking you as you do in practice. And those books are useful.
I know you said that cover letter is really important when like looking for a job or internship, because I'm really interested in working somewhere for however long I can before going to grad school. A lot of the places, though, one of the requirements is having a master's degree.
Offices are?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of
I've seen that
there's
a
a
lot.
lot of offices that have like a requirement to apply to be an intern. That have that requirement. Do you have any suggestions on like how to, I guess, persuade them that you're?
Well, I would say to talk about a willingness to do anything. That you are, and I would be totally open about the fact that you want to work for a couple of years before you want to go to grad school. And sometimes offices are a little more willing to take on somebody if they know this is like a 2-year commitment. Because they may not want to hire you, let's say, out of undergraduate school if they're thinking maybe this is 10 years and I need somebody who maybe has gone to a master's program. But if it's like a year and a half, 2 years, and you communicate in your letter that you've had experience, that you can draw, that you can work with various programs, and that you want a period of time working in an office and you're willing to do anything. I mean, one of the things that we look for in people is a sense of enthusiasm, and we don't want to take people who will only believe that they're only okay to do certain kinds of things. I mean, we do have a chore list in our office, and it rotates. The chores to we have a dishwasher, but there's the dish day, and there's refrigerator day, and people have to take out the garbage in the bathroom. And if you think you're too important to take out the garbage in the bathroom, then there are other studios for you, and there are other places for you. That's not our studio, because you're part of the family and you have to act like the family. And I think that if you show that you are ready, willing, and able, I think that means a lot. And you're straightforward. You're really open in the letter. I think letters that are really sort of tight and formal and don't give any sense of who you are as a human being are easy letters to put aside, because you get a lot of them. Talk about where you grew up. I don't know. Something that pulls you out of the big crowd, a faceless crowd of it has always been my hope to work for Todd Williams, Billie, Tsien architects. And it's like, that's the, if I see the name of our office more than 5 times in a letter, I don't know who told people this was a good idea to do. It's not a good idea to do because you really feel that's like, you're just plugging it in. You're plugging in the name of the office. So it's about making, sort of touching somebody's face. I'm a human being. Look at me. So I spend a little time on those letters.
How would you suggest, this is more just your personal opinion, how would you suggest like seeking out firms that have kind of the same mentality as you, like from the beginning, like looking into like, I don't really know much about this firm, like how do I know what their kind of work style is?
Well, I think a couple things. Depends on where you would be. I mean, one of them would be finding people who graduated from this program who are working in offices. I mean, whether, I don't know if there's some sort of network where you can sort of find them and sort of talk to them about different offices. And they may not even like the office that they're in, but they may like other practices and be able to sort of point them in the direction of other practices. I mean, I think you have to hopefully feel some affiliation with the work. And if you look at the work and you don't feel interested in it, I suppose that there's something to be learned in the beginning from the offices, but it's certainly not a place where you want to park yourself for a very long time if you don't feel connected to the work, because then you won't be inspired and you won't feel sort of driven to dive in. I don't know whether there are various sort of gossip websites that talk about office culture. That would be an interesting one, actually. Sort of various posts about office culture of people in the office.
Office gossip. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of action happening outside, so they're probably setting up for some food and such. So we can break. Unless there are any other questions.
I have another quick question. Would you recommend the same things that you said about the things to put in the cover letter for someone who is requiring a master's degree as a firm who is requiring many years of experience, even if it's a lower position?
Yes. I mean, I think first what you want to do is get somebody's attention. And you want to make whoever is reading it, who's connected with that firm, feel like there's a specific reason why you're writing to them. Whether it's a project, something you saw on the website, something that it's not that they're just on the list. And I think that applies whether you're looking for an internship between grad school, whether you're looking for work. I think that makes people sort of look at you because you have actually looked at them.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Well, I'm happy to meet all of you. You guys will be fine. You will be. You will be. So it's sort of an interesting time also because it's one of the things about architecture and practice is, and that you will need to accept, is that it's always like this. And in the past, I know my parents were so worried that I was going to become an architect because they didn't actually understand what an architect did. But it seemed a little too arty. And they thought that there were other professions that were like just this. But nothing is this continuous anymore. Everything is like this. so the most important thing, and what we say to our children is, you want to do something that you love. And so if you love this, you'll follow it this way. And it's not that different from if you had gone to law school or business school, or it's everybody's doing this, but at least the roller coaster that you're on is the roller coaster that you love, and that's a great way to live your life. And right now the roller coaster is up. People are busy. Basically, a lot of people are hiring. So the good news is we would not say that you graduated in 2008. That was not a good time. But actually what that did was, I'll sort of finish off here, it's interesting, in 2008, people were graduating and the stock market went and everything tanked for a while. What that did was, it took a lot of people in architecture school who graduated, and it formed a whole series of kind of subdivisions of architecture, the kind of maker, sort of architect, clothing designer, architect, object maker, furniture maker, website maker, and it sort of took a profession that I think was quite tight and splintered it into roots, and I think was actually very, very interesting, making jewelry. So there were all these other things that sort of blossomed out of it. So I think it's when you do something that you